Chapter 421. Besides, Maniac had been competing with Joel in secret for a while now. Between the two of them, Maniac had control of the underground circle and ran a few businesses on the black market. Meanwhile, Joel was the top dog of the trade industry as a legal businessman. As such, both men were on considerably equal grounds. However, Joel was far richer than Maniac. If Joel died and Viewspring Corp collapsed, Maniac would be the only person eligible to take over all of Joel's businesses. He would then run both sides of Anya City. By then, no one would be a match for him. Wilbur looked at Maniac one last time. Would I need to lie to you? Report to me every now and then. I've left my number and address on the table. Maniac watched as Wilbur left, and he began to pace about the nightclub, seemingly oblivious to the pain from his bruises. Wilbur's power was undeniable. He would definitely be able to hold the authorities down. After all, Maniac himself was connected to some of the people working for Anya City's officials. It was just that those connections were not as strong as Joel's. Maniac had been in Joel's shadow all these years. It seemed like his time to shine had come. Haley eventually walked over cautiously. Manny, are you all right? Ha 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 ha. Maniac let out a wild laugh, scaring the wits out of Haley. I'm perfectly fine. It's time for me to come up and for Joel William to go down. Haha, Anya City's going to be mine real soon. Haley stared at Maniac in shock, not knowing what to say. Had he really lost his mind? Wilbur returned to his hotel room and immediately called Farron to have him get someone to tell the Anya City officials not to stand in the way of Maniac's takedown of Joel. After the call, Wilbur murmured to himself, Joel William, you killed my brother's parents and now I'm going to give you a taste of bankruptcy before avenging the lives you took with your own. I'm sure that would be a fair enough trade. That evening, over at West End College, with Elsa and Farron's help, Skyler had been enrolled in the school as an undercover agent posing as a dance major living right across the women's dorms. The view from Skyler's dorm was directly overlooking Shelby's dorm. Skyler was currently stretched out on an ottoman, swaying leisurely as he kept an eye on the view across him. There was a cup of tea on the little table next to the ottoman. As he swayed, he crossed his arms behind his head. Skyler had no complaints about any of this. He had a great view, and he was supposed to keep an eye on it too. This lasted all the way until night fell and a group of girls walked out of the dormitory building. Skyler got up and peered out of the window. A group of 3 girls holding hands seemed to be making their way out. Let's go shopping. Skyler took a large swig of his tea and headed downstairs. The girls strolled along the night market outside of the college, chatting and giggling over some snacks and trinkets they bought. Not long after, one of the girls said, Give me a second. I need to use the bathroom. Her friends nodded, and the girl headed to the bathroom through a narrow alley. Just then, a man wearing a black baseball cap and face mask appeared at the entrance of the bathroom. Just as he was about to go inside, a figure showed up out of nowhere to clamp a hand over the man's face and drag him away. The man with the face mask struggled. However, the person holding him down seemed impossibly powerful. Just like that, the man was dragged all the way around to the other side of the bathroom. The girl emerged from the bathroom not long after, rejoining her friends and continuing to shop. Around the corner, Skyler let go of the man wearing the face mask. The man took out a dagger at once, shouting, Who the hell are you? Chapter 422. I'm your worst nightmare. Fuck you. The man brandished his dagger, moving to stab Skyler in the chest. Skyler chuckled, drawing a line in the air with his pointer finger. Blood sprayed the air as both the dagger and the hand holding it fell to the ground. The face mask man cried out in pain, clutching the open wound as he stared at Skyler in shock. Skyler smiled. Go back and tell Joel William that he's going to have to send someone a little more powerful if he wants to hurt Shelby Mothleen. You're clearly not cutting it. The man in the face mask knew that he was no match for his opponent. Immediately, he turned to flee. Skyler chuckled. He returned to the night market and bought himself an ice cream cone, eating it as he trailed the girls from far behind. It's a pretty cool job, if I'm being honest. Skyler wondered if he would be paid for this. On second thought, the image of Wilbur pummeling him to a pulp was enough for him to quickly drop that idea. Over at Anya City, in a random hotel room. Wilbur was in the middle of meditating when there was a knock on the door. He got up and saw Walter at the door, as well as another middle-aged man. "Who's this?" Wilbur asked. Walter immediately replied, "Mr. Penn, this is Chester Jarl. He's a pretty powerful figure in Anya City that I invited over to talk to you." "Oh, come in then." Wilbur invited both men inside and brewed them each a cup of tea. Walter said, "Mr. Penn, I'm currently handling Ethan's case as we speak. However, I'm sure you know that it's going to take some time." "I know that, yes," said Wilbur. Walter said, "Well, I'm sure you also know that Joel William is the richest man in Anya City with a wide network of connections. We never win a court case over him." "Oh, what do you suggest we do about that then?" Wilbur sat down across them. Walter answered, "Mr. Penn, I'd just like you to know that both you and Ethan have treated me more than well and paid me handsomely too. I'm doing my best here." "Yes, I understand." "That's great then. I invited Mr. Jarl over because his uncle is one of the higher-ups in Anya City. What I'm trying to say is, if you really want to help Ethan, maybe you could pay Mr. Jarl to have a talk with Joel. If you can pay a little more, Joel might go easy on Ethan. We're thinking of a 12-year prison sentence. Once that's done, he'll be a free man," said Walter. Wilbur looked up at Walter with a frown. Walter hurried to say, "Elsewhere, I'm not trying to scam you or anything, Mr. Penn. You've paid me more than enough. I'm not a greedy person." "I believe that," said Wilbur. "Are you sure Joel's going to let Ethan go just like that?" Just then, Chester finally broke his silence to say, "My uncle holds a position powerful enough that will make Joel consider a lighter sentence. My own position will definitely be of use as well." "That's right. With Mr. Jarl and his uncle, as well as your compensation, I'm almost positive that Joel won't go as hard on Ethan and insist that he dies," said Walter. Wilbur smiled. "I think I'll pass. I've got everything planned out already. Mr. Penn, I don't give out offers like this every day. I hope you've thought it through. This is your only shot at saving this brother of yours," Chester said haughtily. Wilbur frowned. "Thank you for the offer, but I really don't need it." "Are you looking down on me?" Chester said at once, getting to his feet. Chapter 423. Wilbur glanced at Chester. "Don't get all worked up. I can handle this myself. So why would I need your help?" Walter immediately panicked when he heard what Wilbur said. He had used up all his connections to get Chester to agree to help Wilbur. However, Wilbur had offended him just like that. If this were to go on, Ethan might even die a more painful death. Wilbur was rich, wasn't he? Why was he so flaky when it came to making decisions? Chester sneered coldly. "Since you don't want my help, I won't give you any. You're going to have to pay me my appearance fees though." "What do you mean by that?" Wilbur asked, confused. Chester said, "Regardless of whether or not you end up using my help, I charge $10 million for every talk I'm invited to have. These are my rules, and you're going to follow them." "Got it. Is that the case?" Wilbur turned to look at Walter. Walter broke out into a sweat. Chester had not mentioned any of that before. However, Walter had also not expected Wilbur to just turn him down like that. Walter had accidentally made things worse and did not know what to say. After all, neither of these people were worth messing with. Wilbur chuckled, turning to Chester. "Your appearance alone costs $10 million. So how much would it cost for you to help me?" As Walter stated. "500 million, excluding your compensation to Joel," Chester said at once. Wilbur raised his brows, barking out a laugh. "Are you serious? Can you guarantee that you'll get it done?" "I can't guarantee anything, but that's my fee. Don't forget that this is the richest man of Anya City you're dealing with." "No one's going to help you aside from me," Chester said haughtily. Wilbur shook his head. "You must think I'm an idiot, asking for $500 million just like that. I've got the money, but you don't have the right to earn it. How fucking dare you speak to me like that? I'll send your ass to jail too." Chester was immediately pissed. Walter flew to his feet in a panic. Gentlemen, why don't we calm down? Please, let's talk about this." He had only been trying to help, however, it had ended up making things worse. Just then, someone knocked at the door again. Wilbur got up to open the door, It was Maniac. Come in. Wilbur turned around, sitting back down in the living room. Maniac came inside, closing the door after him. His eyes flashed with confusion at the sight of the men sitting on the couch, especially at Chester. However, that confusion soon dissipated. Walter was shocked as well. Had Wilbur actually gone looking for Maniac to the point that he had actually showed up at Wilbur's doorstep? Knowing the kind of person Maniac was, no good could come out of this. Chester was surprised to see Maniac as well, his expression turning unreadable. Just then, Maniac bowed to Wilbur respectfully. "Sir, I've got some updates for you." "Let me have them," said Wilbur. Maniac glanced at Chester and Walter before hesitating. "Come on, out with it," said Wilbur with a frown. Maniac immediately spoke up. "All right. Just last night, I was able to gather all 500 of my men to take down every single one of Viewspring Corp's businesses. I'm sure it won't be long before we hear about it." "Not bad. You move pretty fast," Wilbur nodded. Maniac continued. "I just came to ask what extent you'd like for me to take this to, sir." "Just go all the way. As long as you're not hurting any innocent people, go as hard as you can. Make Joel William lose as much as possible," said Wilbur. Maniac nodded. "Understood. I'll get to it." Wilbur nodded. Walter was completely stunned. Maniac was the top dog of the underground circle in Anya City, second only to Joel William. What was happening here? And why was he being so respectful to Wilbur? Chapter 424. Chester was in shock at the sight of Maniac's attitude as well. It was important to note that Maniac had hardly backed down even in Joel's face. Just then, Wilbur said, "Ah, right. Maniac, do you know this guy, Chester Jarl?" "I do," Maniac said. Wilbur smiled. "He asked me to pay him $500 million just for him to talk to Joel. I said no, and he asked for $10 million in appearance fees. He even threatened to send me to prison if I turn him down. I'm a little scared." Chester's expression shifted, and Maniac looked over at him with a murderous grin. "Sir, this guy just has an uncle working in some low position for the city government. He's hardly powerful at all. Besides, Joel just lost his son. I don't think his uncle would be able to change his mind." "So you're saying I'm not going to get my money's worth if I paid him?" "No, I don't think so. His uncle can't even handle me. So do you think Joel would even give him the time of the day?" Hilarious. Those words made Chester flush an ugly shade of purple. However, he remained silent. It seemed like Maniac was right then. Wilbur chuckled. "Hear that, Chester? You don't have the right to be making just about anyone's money. Got it? I'm going to get going." Chester said nothing more after that as he turned to leave. Maniac coldly called out from behind him, "If I catch wind of you trying to fiddle with this situation, I'm feeding you to the dogs." Chester trembled all over, fleeing at once without any of the bravado and cockiness from earlier. Walter got to his feet shakily. "Mr. Penn, I really was just trying to help. I swear I didn't have any other intentions. I promise." He was telling the truth. It was just that Wilbur already had Maniac on his side and was in the middle of taking down Joel. There was honestly no need for Walter to do what he had done. It also seemed like Wilbur's plan not only involved saving Ethan, but also taking down Joel completely. This was an incomprehensible war to Walter. At this point, he truly regretted his actions. If Wilbur were to mistake Walter for trying to get something out of this, all Wilbur had to do was send Maniac after Walter, and his career in Anya City would be done for. Wilbur got to his feet, patting Walter on the shoulder. "Don't worry. I know you did that out of wanting to help Ethan. I'm just telling you that all you need to be responsible for is handling the legal case and nothing else." Yes. I understand. I'll be on my way then, Mr. Penn." Wilbur nodded as Walter practically fled the room in a fit of terror. It was until Walter had reached the end of the hallway that he wiped at the sweat on his brow. Walter had not expected Wilbur to be so incredibly powerful and capable. He seemed to have taken down the city's notorious madman Maniac in just a single night, and he probably had a plan to take down Joel too. At this point, it was possible that Wilbur would come out victorious. Incredible. Truly incredible, Walter marveled, hurrying off. 3 days later, Joel was throwing a fit in his house, breaking all the furniture and antiques he could see. His servants hid to the side, their heads bowed as no one dared to go up to him. Joel's eyes were bloodshot as if he wanted to eat someone alive. His factories, buildings, and work sites had all been attacked almost simultaneously. A group of people had used a plethora of excuses to tear the spaces down and riot outside, making as big of a scene as imaginable. Lots of sites had to stop work because of the attacks. If this went on, Joel was going to suffer a huge loss. He had also asked around and found out that the attacks had been carried out by Maniac's men. "You've really lost your fucking mind, Maniac. Do you know what's going to happen to you?" Joel shouted at the top of his lungs like a feral beast. Chapter 425. At last, Joel finished letting out his anger and collapsed onto the sofa as his chest heaved. A long while later, he seemed to calm down enough as he lit a cigarette and fell deep into thought. Eventually, he called out, "Jar!" Jar Watman, Joel's secretary, hurried inside from where he had been hiding, trembling from head to toe. "Yes, Mr. William. What can I do for you?" "Call Boretti. Tell him I need to see him. It's urgent," said Joel. Jar immediately whipped out his phone and did as he was told. Joel's expression was ashen then as he fumed. "How dare you do this to me, Maniac? Well, I won't be playing nice either. Don't fault me for that." Just then, over at a random building, a crowd of property owners was gathered in front of the sales department, protesting at the top of their lungs and waving flags demanding that their properties be handed over to them on time and their losses be compensated. It had been 3 years overdue, and none of the property owners had received their units yet. The property handler paced about in his office, extremely anxious. If this had happened in the past, he would have just gotten security to beat these people up until they left. He had powerful people backing him up and enough money to win over these pesky protesters for sure. However, things were different now. There had been quite a ruckus over the past couple of days, and the property handler had called for a large amount of security to disperse the crowd and even attack the property owners. This time, however, the property owners were all working together. It was an unusual sight. There were a few pretty powerful people in the crowd as well, and the security guards had been beaten beyond recognition. Over the recent days, the property handler and guards had no choice but to stay hidden in the office as they did not dare to go outside. The property owners had crowded up to right outside the office. There was nowhere else that they could go. The staff had called the owner of the company. However, they were told that the owner's secretary was handling the matter and to stall for the time being. There was not much stalling they could do now, was there? Just then, one of the property owners shouted, "Give us our units, or we'll trash this place and beat that piece of shit person in charge to death." The property owners were thoroughly riled up now. The hunky blokes at the front of the crowd brandished their batons, charging inside and destroying everything in sight. The rest of the property owners crowded behind them, shouting their chants at the top of their lungs, with many even joining in the attacks. They had been bullied and taken advantage of for far too long. They had not gotten their units and had even been attacked after asking for what they deserved and paid for. Now that someone was standing up for them, they were finally able to get back at the bastards who had stepped on them for so long. The handler shouted for the guards to deflect the attacks, trying to hold the situation down. The guards were usually experts at handling the property owners, but this time, they were taken down within minutes as they howled in pain. The handler dialed for the police, running for his life. However, he was caught in no time and beaten to the ground. Not long after, the police arrived. After listening to what had happened, they ruled the incident as an economic dispute and just told them to settle it in a business discussion. With there being nothing else that he could do, the handler could only cry and promise the property owners that he would make sure they got their units as soon as possible. Of course, the property owners had been in cahoots with each other long before, and kicked all the staff members out before taking over the entire building altogether. Over at a manufacturing factory, workers waved their flags high in the air in a group strike. They shouted at the top of their lungs about the poor working conditions they had been put in, with dismal wage rates and hostels that looked more like prisons. The factory supervisor and all the security guards hid in the control room, not knowing what to do. Chapter 426. Soon enough, tens of thousands of workers stormed into the control room. They immediately displaced the guards and the supervisor was beaten to a pulp and almost thrown off the top floor. This happened at every single factory and company owned by Viewspring Corp, to the point they were almost in complete disarray. That evening, an Audi S6 was parked by a lake on the outskirts of town. A Bentley S50 drove over to it, and out emerged Joel William. He walked up to the Audi, bowing to the back window. The window of the Audi lowered by half. Joel immediately spoke up. "Mr. Boretti, I'm sure you know about everything that's been happening to the company lately. I'm not too clear on the details. It's that bastard Maniac. He hired some people to screw us over. My company's in shambles right now." "Screw you over? How?" "He's been digging up certain matters. They're asking for the units they've paid for. My workers are on a strike, insisting they get a pay raise and complaining about how much overtime they've been doing. They should be grateful that they even have a job in the first place. How dare they?" "Are you sure you're completely innocent? Did you give them their units on time? Did you pay your employees a fair wage and compensate them for their overtime work?" "I mean, Mr. Boretti, you know my hands are tied. I have to do things this way. That's how everyone else is doing things too. It's the norm. Leave other people out of this. This is your own problem. You better fix it as soon as possible or no one's gonna be able to help you." "Mr. Boretti, all you need to do is put a word or two out and I'm sure Maniac will stop what he's doing. Otherwise, those idiot workers would have never had the nerve to protest. You should settle your own grievances. I haven't got the time. Also, I've got one of my men to return the gift you sent me back to you. Please leave me out of anything like this in the future." The window rose back up as the Audi drove off. Joel was left standing there. A long while later, Joel exploded with outrage. "You turd. You took all my money and now you're just leaving me in the dust. Go jump off a fucking bridge. Why don't you?" He cursed and shouted at the top of his lungs before returning to his car and taking out a cigarette. He smoked cigarette after cigarette, his chauffeur and secretary not daring to say a word as they sat in the front. At last, Joel realized that he was dealing with a powerful opponent here, someone unlike anyone he had ever met before. There was no way Maniac would be capable of pulling something like this on his own. Joel then calmed down before saying in a low voice, "Call Maniac up. I want to see him tonight." "Yes, Mr. Williams." The car set into motion as Joel's secretary hurried to do as told. That night at 10 o'clock, over at Haley's office in Highland nightclub, Maniac sat behind his desk sipping a glass of whiskey while Haley stood beside him, waiting on him. Not long after, Joel entered the room with an ashen expression. "Ah, Mr. William, have a seat," Maniac said, forcing out a smile. Joel sat right down across Maniac, his tone cold. "Let's get straight to the point, Maniac. Who are you doing this for and what do they want?" "You're no fool, Joel. It's true that someone's making me do this. But why should I tell you who they are?" Maniac smirked. Joel's brows furrowed tightly. "I know we have our differences, but we were civil before this. You broke the peace and balance. You're going to pay for it." "I'm not so sure about that," said Maniac as he laughed. "Are you saying you're going through with this then?" "Oh, I'm not doing anything like that. Like you said, someone's out to get you. I'm just acting on orders," said Maniac as he stared at Joel coldly. Joel's expression was positively thunderous then. "Tell me who that is, Maniac. I'll pay you double what he's paying you." Chapter 427. Maniac cast a look of disdain at Joel. "There's someone you can't afford to mess with. This isn't something you can pay your way out of, so forget about it." Joel flew to his feet when he heard that. His tone was sharp as he said, "I'm not scared of you, Maniac. I could hold you down back then and I still can." "It's true that you used to be able to hold me down." Maniac got to his feet, staring right at Joel. "But you're dead this time and you're paying in your own blood." "Got it." Joel paused for a while before saying, "This is about Ethan Mothleen, isn't it?" No comment. Maniac leaned back in his chair, taking another sip of whiskey. Joel sneered, "Don't you forget about Mr. Taft, Maniac. You're an idiot if you think you can run on your city with him around." Joel turned to leave after that. Maniac's expression shifted slightly. After Joel was gone, Haley asked softly, "Who's Mr. Taft? Is he really powerful?" Maniac got to his feet, pacing to and fro in the office before saying, "Chance Taft. also known as Mr. Taft to us all. He's an expert ambience-level cultivator who's been famous for 20 years, back when I was just a nobody hooligan. He retired to cultivate during his peak, so most of us have pretty much forgotten about him. He sounds really powerful. Do you think Joel might ask this Mr. Taft for help then? I can't be too sure about that. However, I've got to tell Mr. Penn about this at once. Who do you think's more powerful between the two of them? I don't know either. Mr. Taft was an expert ambience-level cultivator, but Mr. Penn seems incredibly powerful and mysterious as well. I honestly can't tell who would win. Wouldn't things get really dangerous if Joel is truly able to get Mr. Taft's help? That might not be the case. Mr. Penn had been powerful enough to take down a corporation belonging to someone like Joel William. Otherwise, Joel wouldn't have come to see me. Also, who knows if Joel will be able to convince Mr. Taft to help him out? And if Mr. Taft does agree to help, it might not end in a fight. As for how dangerous things might get, people in our industry have never lived a safe life. You need to take risks if you want to make it big. Haley said nothing more after that. She knew just what Maniac was like. He was an adventurous risk-taker who would never change his mind after it was made, regardless of what Haley tried to say. Maniac left the office after that, driving over to where Wilbur was staying. Wilbur was currently snacking on a hot dog from a street stall, listening to a group of tipsy guys bragging to their girlfriends. Did you hear about the ongoing battle between Maniac and Joel William? Of course I have. I heard that Joel William's been losing. What? He's the richest guy in Anya City. He used to be able to completely lock Maniac down. Well, rumor has it that Maniac's working for someone incredibly powerful. This person's powerful enough to grind Joel William into the dirt. Really? Gosh. If only Mr. Taft was around, he would have taken care of whoever was behind this back then. You're talking like you've met Mr. Taft himself. My old man has. They even had a drink together. Ha 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 ha. The group burst out laughing. Wilbur was a little amused by the conversation. Rumors sure traveled fast. Just then, his phone rang. Wilbur got up to pay and returned to his room to the sight of Maniac standing by the door. Come in. Wilbur opened the door, and both men headed inside. What's the matter? Maniac told Wilbur about Joel coming to look for him. Anything else? Maniac then told Wilbur about Mr. Taft, making sure to watch Wilbur's expressions closely. Chapter 428. However, Wilbur merely smiled. It doesn't matter who he is. Anyone who stands in the way of me taking Joel William down and avenging my brother will have to pay the price. Perhaps it might even be with their life. Maniac nodded. I'll do my best. Don't worry. You can go now. And don't worry about it. You're working for me now, so no one's going to hurt you. Thank you, sir. Maniac bowed and left the hotel. He stood at the curb, his expression dark. I'm putting my life on the line for this. Guess that's fate. At this time, Joel's car arrived at the foot of a mountain far on the outskirts of Anya City. There was a moderately sized villa there, with the name of the place written on the door. Pure Heart Villa. Joel got out of his car and promptly fell to his knees in front of the villa as he shouted, Mr. Taft, it's Joel William. I need to see you, sir. Not long after, a man in his 40s walked out with a frown. Do you know where you are? It's the middle of the night and you're causing such a ruckus. Get out now. Sir, my father, Larry William, was a friend of Mr. Taft. I've got a really urgent emergency and need to see him now. Can you please call for him? The sight of someone like Joel in a state like this would usually be enough to cause a slack jaw. However, the middle-aged man only grew even more impatient. Get out or I'm going to make you. Sir, it's really urgent. My life is on the line here. Please help. How dare you? The middle-aged man shouted at Joel, aiming a kick at him that split a wide crack open in the ground where his foot landed. Joel was covered in soot and dust when he finally got to his feet, and the middle-aged man said, Out, or I'm burying you here. Hopelessness washed over Joel at the sight of the man's cold expression. Joel had been the top dog of Anya City and everyone treated him with respect. Within just a few days, he was now verging on bankruptcy and his biggest supporters had abandoned him as well. He had nowhere to go and could only come begging here. However, He was now being turned down. Everything was happening far too quickly for him to simply accept it. Joel lowered his head in despair, gripping a handful of dirt in his fist as if he were trying to crush the soil. All of a sudden, a rumble sounded from the middle of Pure Heart Villa. Multiple rays of light rose into the air that lit up the entire villa, along with an overwhelming pressure. Joel felt his heart rate quicken as if he was about to suffocate. He put a hand to his chest, looking up in the direction of the light. The middle-aged man's expression lit up. Masters finished cultivating. After saying that, he ran off into the villa. A while later, the man came back out and looked at Joel. "Mr. Taft's telling you to go inside." Joel was overjoyed and followed the man into the villa. They wove through several hallways and a sprawling front yard before they were taken to the main hall. There was an elder with white hair sitting in the middle of the hall, radiating a powerful aura that made Joel immediately fall to his knees. "Joel William at your service, Mr. Taft," said Joel. The elder looked Joel up and down. "You're Larry Williams' son?" "Yes. My father is Larry William and I had the honor of meeting you in the past with him," said Joel. Chapter 429. Mr. Taft fell silent for a while before saying, "What's the matter?" "Mr. Taft, the company my father founded is on the brink of collapse. Please, Mr. Taft, I need your help. I don't know how to run a business." "Let me explain, Mr. Taft. It's Maniac. He's been taking over Anya City and doing whatever he wants to ever since you went into solitude to cultivate. My son was just beaten to death, so I sent his killer to prison. However, Maniac's been using that as an excuse to attack me, and I'm now on the verge of bankruptcy. Please help me, Mr. Taft. I've been incredibly wronged." "Is that so?" "Yes, it is. There wasn't much Maniac could do to me before, but I think he's got someone supporting him in secret this time. Even the authorities are staying out of this. Maniac's been wreaking havoc everywhere he goes and taking advantage of his power as an aura-level cultivator. I don't know what else I can do." "Aura-level? Ha 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 ha!" Mr. Taft barked out a laugh, shaking his head. "It seems like anyone can call themselves a top dog these days." "That's right, Mr. Taft. Anya City isn't the same without you. If you help me out, I'm willing to pay you $500 million in appreciation and call you my godfather. Viewspring Corpse will be yours after this too." "Oh," Mr. Taft looked surprised. A moment later, he let out a chuckle. "I was going to help even if you didn't say anything. It seems like these people are becoming more arrogant lately after I haven't run the underground circle in such a long time. I'm now a sanctuary-level cultivator and plan to make a grand reappearance. We can start from your situation. After all, I did know your father rather well." "Thank you, Mr. Taft." Joel could not hold back his joy as he bowed repeatedly. He had pulled out all the stops this time. The person Maniac was working for sounded immensely powerful, and Joel knew he would not be any match for them himself. Instead of going bankrupt, Joel figured that a better way to go about this was to find someone to help. Even though it would result in him becoming a pawn in the future, it would be better than losing everything. Besides, the death of his son was one that had to be avenged no matter what. Otherwise, he'd have no other point in living. Just then, Mr. Taft said, "Zachary, you can go with Joel. Gather all the higher-ups of Anya City here at Pure Heart Villa by tomorrow. I've got an announcement to make." "Yes, master," the middle-aged man named Zachary Yanis said in response, bowing as he did so. Mr. Taft waved a hand, and Zachary said, "Let's go." Joel bowed one last time before getting up gleefully and leaving with Zachary. Just then, Mr. Taft chuckled as he mumbled to himself, 20 years of cultivating. I'm finally a sanctuary-level cultivator. The world shall be wrapped around my finger in no time. Anya City is no match for me." At this time, Joel asked in the car, "Zachary, could you please tell me just how powerful a sanctuary-level cultivator is?" Joel knew that cultivators existed, as Maniac was one. However, he did not know much about them. Zachary said, "A sanctuary-level cultivator is practically a godlike existence. Anyone below that is nothing to them." "Wow, that's amazing. Does that mean that my godfather will be second to none now?" asked Joel. Zachary smiled. "You could say that." "Wonderful. You're going to get it. Maniac and whoever you're working for, Joel said through gritted teeth. The next afternoon, all of Anya City had found out about Mr. Taft re-entering the underground circle and that some higher-ups had also been called to gather at Pureheart Villa. The news of Mr. Taft becoming a sanctuary-level cultivator rocked all the cultivators of Anya City. They knew just how powerful this would make Mr. Taft, so everyone prepared a big gift for their visit to see him. At a little over 6 in the evening, Maniac showed up at Wilbur's room in a fit of panic to break the news to him. Chapter 430. Sanctuary level, huh? Well, that doesn't matter to me. Anyone who stands in my way of revenge is going down all the same, said Wilbur. Maniac was clearly a lot less confident now, even appearing a little cowardly as he frowned. Sir, are you sure you can win over Mr. Taft? What? Are you scared? Wilbur chuckled. Maniac sighed. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't, sir. A sanctuary-level cultivator is powerful enough to crush a mere aura level like me to death. Well, Maniac, I'll give you one last choice. You can either keep working for me or turn to Mr. Taft. You're bearing the consequences of that, though, said Wilbur. Maniac fell silent as he thought about it. A while later, he bowed to Wilbur. Sir, I've got nowhere else to go. I chose to work for you from the start and I'm going to stick with it. No more doubts. The choices you make determine the life you lead. You'll do well if you make the right choices, and fail if you make the wrong ones. You've made your choice, so we'll see where it leads you, said Wilbur. Maniac nodded. I understand. I'll pick you up at 7:30, and we'll head there together. Mr. Taft won't listen to me if I go on my own. Got it. We'll go with your plan then. I'll be on my way now, sir. Maniac turned to leave. Wilbur smiled. I guess Joel William is capable enough to get the help of a sanctuary-level cultivator. This is going to be interesting. That night, at 8 o'clock, Maniac drove Wilbur to the entrance of Pureheart Villa. There were over 20 luxury cars parked around the villa, the gates of the villa wide open with no guards. Maniac and Wilbur looked around before walking right in. The battle between them and Joel was actually not the point of tonight's gathering. Instead, it was the news of Mr. Taft becoming a sanctuary-level cultivator and re-entering the underground circle. Everyone knew that Anya City was going to be run by Mr. Taft once again, and they were all going to do their best to speak their mind. Otherwise, all their power and hard work would go to waste. There were already over 20 people in the main hall, all of them people of power in Anya City. However, everyone was silent as they sat waiting. There was an empty chair in the middle of the hall. On either side of the chair were Zachary and Joel. Zachary was silent like everyone else, while Joel was all smiles. Everyone knew that Joel was Mr. Taft's new godson, despite Mr. Taft himself not having said anything about it yet. His pupil, Zachary, had not denied it, and judging from where Joel was sitting, it seemed like the news was set in stone. Joel now had the support of Mr. Taft. Maniac had a big storm coming his way. Just as everyone was guessing amongst themselves, Maniac and Wilbur walked in. The crowd looked at them, not saying a word. Maniac was not to be messed with, at the very least. Everyone else here could not afford to mess with him. However, Maniac seemed to have grown cocky these days, challenging Joel to the point where he had to ask Mr. Taft for help. From the way things looked, it seemed like there was no way things were going to end well for Maniac. Chapter 431. There will no longer be a place for him in Anya City when Mr. Taft gets involved, right? Joel wondered. Joel felt like he had the upper hand. Perhaps he could kill Maniac on the spot. Everyone ignored the young man behind Maniac, and they thought he was only a sidekick. Joel immediately took on a cold and menacing gaze upon seeing Maniac. Maniac would die countless times if looks could kill. However, Maniac was audacious. He went in and glanced around before sitting with his sidekick. They could not believe he was not afraid at all. Everyone sneered internally and thought, Maniac is forcing himself to look calm. Maniac was the ruler of Anya City, and he had a conflict with Joel, so Mr. Taft would not suffer his existence in Anya City. They wondered how he was brave enough to show up. Zachary stood up at that moment. He looked at everyone and said, "It looks like everyone is here, so let's welcome Mr. Taft." Everyone stood up and greeted synchronously, "Welcome, Mr. Taft." Maniac also stood up, but Wilbur remained seated. Taft slowly walked out from behind a screen partition after a moment. He raised his hand at everyone to gesture at them to sit. Everyone said their formalities before they sat. Chance glanced at everyone and said slowly, "Thanks for humoring this old man and attending my function." "What are you saying, Mr. Taft? You used to be the leader of Anya City. How can we ever forget about you?" "Right. We as businessmen received a lot of support from you, and we've been eagerly waiting for your return, Mr. Taft. You're a saint-level cultivator now, Mr. Taft. You have beasts one of the world's most powerful cultivators. This is great news for Anya City. Surely the cultivation circle in Anya City will be known all over the world from now on." They showered Chance with praises. Meanwhile, Chance merely stroked his beard and chuckled. He announced after a moment, "I have a few important matters to announce today." Everyone instantly went silent with seriousness. "The son of Larry William, Joel William, is now my adopted son. The official ceremony will be held in 3 days. Congratulations, Mr. Taft." It finally came to a confirmation. Joel was bound to be successful from then on. No one would dare to mess with him. However, Maniac seemed to be in trouble. "The second matter is about me being a saint-level cultivator. My vision as a saint-level cultivator will not only be in Anya City because I will rule the Cardin province. I ask every cultivator here today, will you follow me to conquer Cardin province?" The crowd started chanting, "I am willing to follow you, Mr. Taft," as all the cultivators of Anya City bowed down to Chance. They were willing to follow his lead. Well, duh. There is nothing to be afraid of with a saint-level cultivator leading us. When Mr. Taft rules Cardin province, we will have endless riches, status, money, and power. Similar thoughts were shared by many in the crowd. Chance laughed and said, "All right. There is one small matter to deal with before that." Everyone understood he meant the incident between Maniac and Joel. As everyone expected, Chance said, "Joel is my adopted son. I have to help him out if he's in trouble. Maniac, I heard you caused quite a commotion in Viewspring Corp. Is that true?" Everyone looked toward Maniac, waiting to hear his response. Chapter 432. Maniac stood up and replied slowly, "It's true, Mr. Taft." "Why?" asked Chance coldly. Maniac stepped toward Chance and bowed. He said, "It wasn't consensual, Mr. Taft. Someone forced me to do so." The people who did not know the truth were instantly shocked. "Unless that's so?" Wilbur sighed slightly. "It's him." Maniac pointed at Wilbur and declared loudly, "A few days ago, this guy named Wilbur Penn found me. He almost killed me because he's an ambience-level cultivator. He threatened me to attack Joel. I had no choice but to comply. Thankfully, you're back, Mr. Taft. Please seek justice for me, and I'm willing to be your adopted son too." Then, he knelt on the floor without showing any signs of getting up. Everyone was stunned. No one expected Maniac to do that. Could it be true? They thought. Everyone looked toward Wilbur at that moment. The young man looked ordinary. Was he really an ambience-level cultivator? Chance looked at Wilbur and asked slowly, "Are you Wilbur Penn?" "Yes," replied Wilbur nonchalantly. Chance frowned and asked, "Is Maniac telling the truth?" "You could say so." Wilbur remained seated as he admitted it. Chance scoffed coldly and said, "How dare you threaten other people with your level of cultivation in Anya City? That's very bold of you." "Joel William deserves it. His punishment is far from enough," said Wilbur nonchalantly. "How dare you? Stand up when you speak to Mr. Taft. This is outrageous. What's with your attitude?" People started to scold Wilbur. Some of them rolled their sleeves like they were ready to start a fight. However, they were only pretending. Everyone knew Wilbur was a powerful ambience-level cultivator, and he overpowered Maniac. They were no match for him, but they wanted to act like they had the courage to do so in front of Chance. Chance raised his hand to stop everyone when he heard that. He asked coldly, "How about you tell me what Joel did?" "Joel owed my friend tens of millions in construction fees. When my friend went to collect his payment, they refused to pay, and they also resorted to violence against my friend. They sought revenge and blew up my friend's house. His parents were buried alive. Joel is a malicious individual. Even death is too lenient a punishment for him," said Wilbur in a cold tone. Joel stood up angrily and said, "The death of Ethan Osborne's parents was an accident. But he beat my son to death. What about that? I only have one son. You deserved it. Do you believe that the death of his parents was merely an accident? Wilbur also stood up. His cold gaze intimidated Joel. Joel felt a chill and he instantly could not speak. Everyone could tell that was probably true. However, it did not matter without solid evidence. A situation like that depended on who was more capable. So Joel clearly had the upper hand. He had the support of a saint-level cultivator, so he had the power to bring justice to his side. Chance asked in a low voice, "Can you prove that Joel William killed his parents by detonation?" He wiped the evidence a long time ago, but I think everyone knows the truth, Wilbur stated coldly. Upon hearing Wilbur's statement, Chance asked coldly, "How dare you accuse my son without any evidence? Are you trying to disrespect me?" "Disrespect you?" Wilbur sneered and said, "I think you should focus on cultivation and stop being delusional before you die of old age." "How dare you?" Maniac stood up at that moment and interrupted. "Wilbur Penn, I've had enough of you. I might not be your match, but showing such arrogance before Mr. Taft is as good as testing your luck." Wilbur looked at Maniac and sighed. Wilbur said, "You made a bad choice, Maniac. You'll regret it." "I'll regret it," Maniac sneered and said. "The only regret I have is that I didn't look for Mr. Taft sooner so that he'd help me seek justice." Chapter 433. Wilbur laughed out loud before saying, "You sure know how to take advantage of the situation, but you made a big mistake if you think Chance Taft can protect you all. How outrageous. He's too reckless and arrogant." "Fuck you. How dare you be so arrogant in front of Mr. Taft? You're asking for death." "Please take him down, Mr. Taft. Secure the pride of the powerful saint-level cultivators." The crowd was agitated by Wilbur's attitude, and they shouted for Chance to punish Wilbur. Maniac and Joel did not get along, but they had a common enemy at the moment. They both turned to glare at Wilbur. Chance chuckled and shook his head. He said, "Youngsters nowadays don't know their place. I heard you're from Town, so I'll start by making an example out of you. But I won't take your life. I'll spare you, so you can go back and tell your Town comrades to bow down and surrender to me. That way, they can avoid unnecessary casualties. How does that sound?" "Chance Taft, I'm giving you a chance to choose. You can choose to focus on your cultivation in a secluded area and avoid unnecessary casualties by minding your own business. Otherwise, I can play along with your little games. However, you might not be able to bear the consequences," said Wilbur nonchalantly. "Wilbur, you're too arrogant," Maniac shouted while glaring at Wilbur. He looked furious as if they had an irreconcilable grudge. Joel clenched his jaw in anger. That asshole, he betrayed Wilbur at a crucial moment and switched to Mr. Taft's side. I can't believe he also said he wanted to be his adopted son. Now he's acting like he can't stand Wilbur. He's stealing all the spotlight from me. Joel refused to back down. He instantly yelled, "You've gone too far, Wilbur Penn. It's a shame that I'm not a cultivator. Otherwise, I would be fighting you by now." Maniac turned his head, feigning ignorance. There was no way Joel would do that. Maniac fought Wilbur before and got his ass handed to him. Joel noticed that Maniac did not take him seriously. He cursed him and sighed, but there was nothing he could do about it. Chance's patience was at its limits. He looked at Wilbur and said coldly, "It looks like you don't understand what a saint-level cultivator represents. However, you're not worthy of fighting with me, Zachary." "Yes, sir." Zachary stood up and bowed. Chance said, "You are both ambience-level cultivators. You'll be fighting this Wilbur guy in my stead, in case he tells other people that I'm bullying him. It will also show me how much you've improved over the years." "Yes, sir." Zachary approached Wilbur slowly and said, "Mr. Penn, may we have a spar in the yard?" Wilbur did not reply. He got up and walked to the yard. Zachary quickly followed suit. The others swarmed and gathered at the door to watch the battle. Only Chance remained seated in the room. He looked calm. Zachary smiled at Wilbur and said, "Forgive me." A wave of spiritual energy immediately surged out of Zachary as he spoke. A strong spiritual pressure instantly spread around him. Swirling winds instantly appeared in the yard. Wilbur smiled in return. He beckoned at Zachary. Zachary started to look serious. He started to perform seals continuously with his hands. Waves of spiritual pressure continued to ripple. A spell cultivator, Wilbur smiled. Suddenly, Zachary put his palms together. He had completed casting a spell. He shouted, "Giant boulders!" A few huge boulders suddenly appeared out of thin air. They were burning with spiritual flames as they hurtled toward Wilbur. The crowd instantly cheered. That attack alone made Zachary worthy of being considered a powerful cultivator. However, Wilbur only chuckled. He leaped and charged straight at Zachary. He crushed the giant boulders with several punches in the process. The giant boulders exploded with fragments flying everywhere. Zachary quickly moved when he saw that, all the while casting spells with his hands. Boulder spikes. Several sharp spikes instantly rose from the ground beneath Wilbur. Wilbur shouted and swept his leg across the spikes. Over a dozen spikes were all shattered under his immense strength. Chapter 434. However, a 2-meter-tall earth giant rose from the ground when Zachary shouted. It charged toward Wilbur. The earth giant looked strong. Its fists were the size of basketballs, and it had a dirt yellow spiritual radiance on it, seemingly unstoppable. The crowd was utterly shocked to see that. Zachary cast spells after spells that were equally amazing. They had never seen spells like that before. It was especially so with the earth giant that was summoned. There was no way Maniac could overpower that, was there? Everyone unintentionally looked at Maniac, who seemed pissed off and remained quiet. Everyone chuckled at the sight. Indeed, a great mentor produces great students. The student of a saint-level cultivator was that powerful. That meant Taft was terrifyingly powerful. Wilbur Penn clearly did not know his place. Wilbur only chuckled and charged toward the earth giant with his bare fists, instantly battling each other. Zachary watched the battle from the side, but he did not stop forming seals with his hands. He seemed to be preparing for his ultimate move. That was the standard battle mode of a spell cultivator. Spell cultivators could stall their opponents with intermediate spells while they prepare for their advanced move, so they could land a fatal attack on their opponents. Combat cultivators could not defeat spell cultivators without getting close to them, so they would stay at a disadvantage. The fists of the earth giant had a terrifying power. Punches kept raining down on Wilbur. Wilbur moved abnormally fast. The earth giant was strong, but it was not agile enough to land a hit on Wilbur at all. Wilbur moved behind the earth giant and threw a punch. Boom! The earth giant exploded into pieces on the spot. Everyone was shocked at how amazing Wilbur was. Zachary cast 3 continuous spells, so they could not believe that he was still unharmed. Wilbur continued to walk towards Zachary after he defeated the earth giant. Zachary completed casting an advanced spell at that moment. Boulder Dragon Bomb, he shouted, and the spiritual energy in him surged. A dragon head made of earth rose from the ground in front of him. The dragon head opened its huge mouth and spewed out flaming boulders half a meter wide. The flaming boulders hurtled toward Wilbur at high speed. The boulder bomb soared with a terrifying howl. A powerful gust of wind swept through the whole yard. The destructive power was astonishing. Everyone held their breaths as they watched. The power of the spell was too terrifying. They thought to themselves, "I'm afraid I will be blown to bits if I have to face a terrifying spell like that. Wilbur probably won't survive this. We just have to wait and see." However, Wilbur laughed at the attack. Spiritual flames suddenly ignited around his fists as he charged toward the continuous barrage of boulder bombs. Wilbur punched the boulder bombs as the thunderous commotion continued. He shattered the incoming boulder bombs, and he kept closing his distance to Zachary. Meanwhile, Zachary was visibly sweating. An advanced spell like the Boulder Dragon Bomb required a lot of spiritual energy. Nonetheless, Wilbur fought more fiercely as the battle went on. The yard was shrouded in dust and smoke, with constant explosions in the haze, causing everyone to lose sight. Wilbur was about 3 meters from Zachary when the smoke cleared, and everyone could see the battle again. At that exact moment, Wilbur threw a punch. Chapter 435. Everyone instantly exclaimed. Zachary had a solemn look too. He quickly cast a spell with his hands and yelled, "Earth Shield!" A solid earth shield rose in front of him. There was a spiritual radiance on the shield, and it had many runes on it. The earth shield was an intermediate spell. Wilbur cast it before. However, Wilbur blasted the shield away with a punch as he shouted. Then, the punch continued forth and landed squarely on Zachary. Zachary could not do anything to stop it. He could only watch Wilbur's punch land on his chest. With a loud bang, Zachary stumbled backward while blood dripped from the corner of his mouth. Wilbur stopped and stood with hands behind his back, stopping his attacks on Zachary. Zachary was confused for a moment. Then he wiped the blood off his mouth slowly. He bowed at Wilbur and said, "Thanks for sparing me." Wilbur nodded slightly, but his eyes were fixated on the room. Everyone was very shocked at that point. Zachary was almost a peak ambience level cultivator, and he knew a plethora of amazing earth-type spells. They could not believe he was defeated because it was simply unbelievable. They all looked at Wilbur and finally realized he was astounding. However, there was a saying in the cultivation world that everything was inferior to a saint-level cultivator. It was common knowledge engraved into the souls of every cultivator. Wilbur was astounding, but he would not be the match for Mr. Taft if he was not a saint-level cultivator. He defeated Zachary Yanez, but his inevitable defeat was fated, and it could not be changed. Dude, don't get all smug just because you defeated Mr. Yanez. You should know that Mr. Taft is a powerful saint-level cultivator, yelled Maniac. Wilbur chuckled and glanced at him. Maniac was startled, and he unintentionally backed away. Suddenly, Chance walked out slowly. The crowd hurriedly made way for him. Chance stood several meters in front of Wilbur. He first glanced at his student and scolded coldly. "You useless thing." "Sorry, sir. I wasn't as good as him, and I've embarrassed you." Zachary bowed and he looked ashamed. Chance scoffed coldly before he looked at Wilbur. He said coldly, "You have what it takes as a pre-saint level cultivator, but you're still not a saint level cultivator. However, I know it must be hard on your journey of cultivation, and you're talented. I can forget about the past if you're willing to surrender yourself to me." It seemed like Chance did not want his talents to go to waste. "I think you're delusional," said Wilbur nonchalantly. Joel said, "Dad, this guy's ignorant. Don't waste your time on him." "No way. Wilbur is my biggest enemy. What will the future hold for me if Wilbur surrenders to Mr. Taft?" Joel thought to himself. What a shame. Chance brushed his beard before he said, "I wanted to spare your life, since you injured my students and stayed ignorant. It looks like I have to bury you here today." "Yes. Kill him. We can't spare him. He's too arrogant. Mr. Taft, chop him into pieces because he dared provoke a saint-level cultivator." Everyone shouted their insults. Wilbur smiled like he was mocking them. He said, "Fight me if you can, or do you all just want to talk smack?" Everyone shut up instantly. They could shout all they want, but they did not have the courage to fight Wilbur. Chance yelled angrily at that moment. "You're too arrogant behaving like that in front of a saint-level cultivator. You're just a saint-level cultivator. Stop talking like it's so scary," mocked Wilbur nonchalantly. Chance lost his temper immediately. "You do not insult a saint-level cultivator. This is common knowledge for cultivators." Wilbur Penn made a huge mistake by saying that, the crowd thought. "All right, kid. I'll show you what true power is today," Chance then shouted. "Death Earth!"